And we're back. And this time we are putting each other on the hot seat. I'm Nuvyn.
And I'm Alex.
And welcome to another amazing edition of The Quiet Part Out Loud, where we get behind the LinkedIn profile and seek to understand what motivates people, what inspires them, moving beyond what advice do you have into what did you do that really messed up? I want to hear about the failures along the way towards that journey of success.
Yes, the quiet part.
Exactly. That sometimes is not so quiet. I think my quiet part out loud is just my out loud part louder.
Your loud part.
Yes.
So Nuvyn, in your bio, we mentioned that your soapbox subject is maternity leave. We both have been through each our own sets of maternity leave. I think they were equally very different. So tell me about your experience.
Navigating the complexity of maternity leave in both Canada and the United States, because it's not enough just to have a couple of kids in each country.
Right.
I think that maternity leave in Canada is one of the greatest forms of discrimination against professional women. And here's why. Women want choice. And the way our maternity leave is structured in this country is you leave. You're out of the picture for 12 months. Oh, what's that? You want longer? 18 months. And there is no sense of work integration. There's no way to keep one foot in the workplace, one foot home with the baby, unless you have these side deals with your employer, as many women do, as I did, to say, listen, I can't leave for a year or for 18 months. I don't want to. Yet the system is set up that is my only option if I want to have the benefits of being on maternity. There's no opportunities for part-time work. You compromise and risk the benefits that you do receive if you are found out to be working. So then you create this underground culture of women that are actually working on maternity leave. And so I would love to advocate for women's choice when it comes to different maternity options. There is not one size fits all when it comes to careers and professional advancement, yet there seems to be when it comes to having a baby and working.
I agree that in a maternity leave scenario where you're offered options, you're offered a flexible reintegration, or you're offered to stay in touch with your team. That's something I experienced that was hard to get over, is that, I'm having a baby and I'm going on my mat leave. And okay, we're going to take away your access to your email. You're still an employee. We're taking away your access to your email. We're taking away, your conversations with your colleagues. We're taking away, at my place of work, when I went on my first maternity leave, there was a share purchase plan, and you were still allowed to participate, but you weren't getting paid by the organization. So you had to purchase your shares with your own money during your maternity leave, or you had to forfeit them. And my background, I've done a lot of work on how women uniquely experience money. And that is maternity leave. Having a child is the single largest reason that the way women and men experience money is different. We have to remove ourselves from the workplace. We do remove ourselves from the workplace. We don't have an income. We don't contribute to our pension plan or our stock purchase plan or our RSP during that time. And so that space and time is what increases the wealth gap or the finance gap between men and women, is because we have this what's called volatile earning pattern. What it really is we have to remove ourselves from the workplace. And to your point, every baby is different. Every mom is different. And for me, when I had my first child, I took 15 months. I actually ended up taking 4 years off because there was a pandemic in the middle, but I wanted to stay home as long as I possibly could with him. And when I had my second, I I think it was 7 weeks later, I started my own project and I was working part-time. So everything is different. And there should be those options. You should have access to your team and the ability to perhaps be considered for a promotion or, an ease of integration back into your workplace.
I think another way that it is discriminatory against women is when it comes to recruitment. And this is where I will say my quiet part out loud is if you don't think that people and hiring managers are making assumptions as a woman applying for a job and they're doing the math saying, okay, this person's 28 or, late 20s, early 30s, chances are she's going to have a few babies. That goes into whether they are going to hire you or not, because the system is set up that our mat leave is 12 months or 18 months. And as an employer, particularly like a small business, large business, and you're thinking about continuity, economic stability, earning potential and maximization of growth, are you going to hire that person if that's the option that is set out for us as part of our Canadian legislation? That is what the government offers women as their choice for maternity. Two options. You take it or you don't.
And to that end as well, and I might be dating myself, but if we're talking about real dollars, during my maternity leave, I can't remember, I'm going to just use $500 a week. I think government paid maternity leave is $500 a week. And so if you do the math, that's $24,000 a year. So for the average professional woman, let's say makes $80,000 a year, you're making, 30% of what you're normally making. And that you're increasing your expenses. And so if you don't plan for your own finances during that time, it really is just kind of a shock. And Canadian maternity leave is much better than our neighbors to the south. And so
I disagree with that.
Do you?
Yes, because
Okay.
I had two babies
Right.
in the US.
Tell me about
And
it.
actually was a better experience
Tell me about it.
areas. But as it comes to maternity, is they don't have maternity leave there. You go on short-term disability. And so all of the paperwork you fill out is related to a disability, which is funny. And in my obnoxious self, I answered the questions literally, like, how did the condition begin? What is the projected prognosis? I'm like, a healthy baby, I hope. Was it work related? Like, define work. And so I had 5 weeks of maternity leave, but I was fortunate enough to work for a company, and they know their maternity leave is shitty. They know it, and so they are about retaining talent. So after those 5 weeks plus 3 weeks of vacation time was up, I came back to work with my baby. And you know what? There were offices set aside where other working mothers would pump. We had a whole pumping schedule outside because this is the reality. And if you want strong, dedicated employees to come back after maternity leave, you have to make it appealing for them to want to. I mean, this is a competition for top talent. And so it was a much more inclusive, accepting, flexible arrangement because we didn't have this option of being out of the workforce for 12 months. And I think particularly when you're in very senior positions, that is not a reality that many corporations will support. So when I came to Calgary and had another baby, I feel like by now I should have a whole litter of children. And I hope people listening don't think how many does she have? I had the most wonderful boss at the time who said, let me know what you need to be successful. And that was a great way to start a conversation. Then when I went to HR and said, tell me about this Canadian maternity leave that I hear about and people speak of so glowingly. And their first response was, well, actually, we don't have maternity benefits carved out for people on the executive leadership team because, quote, we just figured that by the time you reach that level, you would be done that by now, end quote. And this is a prominent,
That's embarrassing.
very large corporation, institution that should not be responding in that way. And so, we had to navigate through, like, what does this look like? This was pre-pandemic, so there was no participation by Zoom or by Microsoft Teams. And thankfully, I had the support of our leader that was allowed me to actually continue to advance my professional objectives while maintaining and fulfilling my role as a mother.
You make a really good point, because that shouldn't be just reserved to the executive team or top leadership. I do believe that a workplace whereby you can choose how you re-enter when you've just had a child is a more successful workplace. And I think the leadership skills you learn when you have children, I think my entire personality changed, my perspective changed, and you learn patience, and you learn how to function on very little sleep, and you learn,
I think I'm still working on the patience one. I would just put everybody in timeout.
Yes, everybody goes in timeout. So I think that,
Use your words. They forgot all the things you tell your
gentle parenting. But you learn so much, and then coming back into a place where you're treated as though, you have not progressed in that time frame it's a little bit archaic. When I was having the conversation around returning to work, my scenario is much different. I left a very toxic workplace when I was pregnant with my first. I actually left early. I went on stress leave. So I was gone for 15 months. And then when I re-engaged and was talking about returning, I said, how can I kind of ease my way back into this? Because I really was hesitant about going back at all. And the conversation was like, well, no one's ever really asked us that. And we don't really have like a part-time reentry program. And we could maybe give you like a month. And I was like, oh my God, how has this not been discussed before? And so I do think that, like job sharing or, 3 days a week or all mornings or something would really work much better. And to have those options available for women would I think it would make our society so much happier.
Yeah. So there's corporate aspects to dealing with the reality that women have babies and want to continue to work throughout. And I think that some of our listeners would be well served to share their experiences. We need to think creatively about how we are going to create more work-life familial integration. I despise that notion of balance because it implies that your life is two separate entities, work and life, and they will never be in balance. But we should rather approach it more from the standpoint of work-life integration, because that's the reality that we all live. My role as a mother doesn't end when I come to work, nor does my role as an employee or a leader or a CEO end when I'm at home. And so this myth of work-life balance is something that we should all strike from our vocabulary. But I think that there also is the governmental legislative aspect of maternity leave, because that is ingrained and it's a policy. As women and as allies and as corporate leaders and those that are also advocating for more acceptance of paternity leave, we ought to be engaging with our government officials around how can we think more creatively and as a leadership on the global stage of what work-life familial integration looks like. I know sometimes we often look to Scandinavian countries as setting the model and the standard, and I think that's actually really misinformed. And as someone who is a Swede and has spent a lot of time in Sweden, and all of my family is there, they have a very different culture, economic structure, political structure. So it's not reflective that we can look at what they do in Sweden or Norway as a model. That would not work here.
No, it's not apples to apples. And to your point, I think it's not just about maternity leave. It's about, families adding to their family. So it's about a mom and a dad or a mom and a mom or whatever your family looks like. And so how do you share in that, bringing the child into the world? How do we share in that and accept it? And I think that, especially from a paternity leave perspective, I heard a stat that dads in our generation are spending 2 or 3 times more time with their children than our dads did. And so let's let them, right? Let's, create the systems and the policies around those dads being, significant figures in their kids' lives when they're small.
Yeah. Well, certainly more dialogue is needed on this topic, and we encourage people to reach out to Access, share your experiences with us. I would love to put together an op-ed, a discussion, a framework whereby we can present different solutions to government to help create more innovative, dynamic, and inclusive ways of helping to advance this topic. The Quiet Part Out Loud is produced by Access Connects and brought to you by, oh wait, is there a sponsorship opportunity there? Learn more at accessconnects.com.